Choosing your software architecture is more than just a tech decision, right? It's really a journey. It defines how your team is going to build, deploy, and scale everything. So today, that's the journey we're going on. We're going to cut through all the hype around microservices and get down to the real-world, pragmatic choices that every architect has to face. All right, let's jump in.
So here's our roadmap. We've got 5 key stops. First up, we're at that fundamental crossroads. Do we go with a monolith or microservices? Then we'll get into the blueprint for designing them the right way. After that, we'll see how these services actually talk to each other, what it takes to run them at scale, and finally, we'll talk about the real payoff and the most pragmatic way to get there.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, at what is probably the most critical decision point of the entire process. This is the choice that really sets the stage for everything else that's going to follow.
Now, before we go any further, I want you to look at this number, 90%. You know what that is? That's the cost reduction Amazon Prime Video got when they actually replaced a microservices component with, you guessed it, a monolith. This happened in 2023, and it's a huge wake-up call that microservices are not some silver bullet. The choice is way more nuanced than you might think.
And this really gets to the heart of the trade-off. On one side, you've got the monolith. It's way simpler to start with, often cheaper, and the performance can be better because all the calls are happening locally. But, and it's a big but, it's a single point of failure. If one part goes down, the whole thing goes down. And if you need to scale just one little feature, you have to scale the entire application. On the other side, microservices give you that amazing independent scalability and high availability. But you pay for it with higher costs, a ton more operational complexity, and that performance hit you get from making calls over the network. So the real question isn't which one is better, it's which set of trade-offs are we willing to live with.
All right, so let's say you've weighed the options and decided microservices are the way to go. Great. But now comes the really hard part. How you design them is everything. Because if you mess this up, you end up with what people call a distributed monolith. And trust me, that is the worst of both worlds. You get all the complexity of microservices with absolutely none of the benefits.
So the bedrock of any good microservice design comes from this idea in domain-driven design, or DDD, called bounded context. The easiest way to think about it is like you're drawing a really clear property line around a single business function. Everything related to payments lives inside this boundary. Everything about inventory lives inside that one. Inside that line, the language is clear, the rules are consistent, and that's how you build services that can actually stand on their own.
And that leads us directly to loose coupling. This is the goal. This is the whole point. When your services are loosely coupled, it means you can change one without having to change 10 others. You can roll out a new feature for the payment service without ever having to touch or even think about the user profile service. This is what gives you the speed and the resilience that microservices promise in the first place.
This is kind of what that looks like in the real world. You see how each service is its own little self-contained universe? It's a full application stack running in its own container. And they're not even talking to each other directly. They're going through these little service proxies that handle all the networking. Each one is a totally independent unit.
But here it is, the single most common trap people fall into: the shared database. The second you let multiple services write to the same database tables, you've completely thrown away your independence. You've just created a massive, hidden dependency, tight coupling, at the data layer. Now, one little schema change can trigger a domino effect of failures across your whole system. It's a classic anti-pattern for a reason.
So how do you fix it? The solution is to be ruthless about data ownership. Every single piece of data is owned by one and only one service. If another service needs that data, it has to ask nicely through a clean API. It can't just go in and grab it. Now, if you can't tear the databases apart right away, here's a pragmatic first step. At the very least, give write access to only one service. That forces everyone else to go through the owner, which starts to build that healthy boundary.
Okay, so we've got our beautifully designed independent services. The next logical question is, how are they actually going to talk to each other?
And this brings us to another one of those fundamental choices. When one service calls another, does it need to wait for an immediate answer, or can it just fire off a message and get back to its own work? This is the core difference, right? Synchronous versus asynchronous communication.
This table lays out the main options really nicely. You've got REST, which is kind of the default for everything, especially for public-facing APIs. But for internal, service-to-service communication, gRPC can be up to 10 times faster, because it's sending compact binary data instead of text. The catch? Both are synchronous. They create that tighter request-response coupling. If you want the loosest possible coupling, you need to look at message queues. They let you build an asynchronous, event-driven system, which is just perfect for things like background jobs and making your system way more resilient to failure.
Now, what happens when you don't have 5 services, but 50 or 500? It gets chaotic fast. That's where a tool called a service mesh comes into play. The idea is actually pretty cool. A tiny little sidecar proxy sits right next to each of your services, and it acts like its personal traffic cop and security guard. It handles all the messy stuff, like routing, encryption, retries, so your developers can stop worrying about infrastructure and just focus on writing the business logic that actually matters.
So we've designed our services, and we've figured out how they're going to communicate. Now, for the moment of truth, we have to actually run this thing in production. And this is where the complexity can really bite you.
A massive mistake I see teams make all the time is trying to build their own custom plumbing. They'll build their own service discovery or their own health check system. Look, unless that's your company's core business, you're just reinventing the wheel. Focus your precious engineering time on what makes you money and use the incredible, battle-tested open-source tools that already exist for the rest.
And when we talk about infrastructure, the big conversation is always container orchestration. This matrix is a great shortcut. For big enterprise-level production systems, especially across multiple clouds, Kubernetes is pretty much the king. There's no debate. But for smaller teams or just setting up a simple dev environment, Kubernetes can be total overkill. In those cases, something simpler, like Docker Swarm, is a perfect fit. It's about picking the right tool for the job you have today. But you know what? It doesn't matter which orchestrator you pick if you don't do this next thing. This is the one absolute non-negotiable: observability. Think about it. In a monolith, if something went wrong, you had one set of logs to check. Easy. But in a distributed system, a single click from a user might ripple across dozens of services. Without the right tools, finding the source of a problem is like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles. It's almost impossible.
A truly solid observability strategy stands on these 3 pillars. First, you need centralized logging to pull all your logs from every service into one searchable place. Second, you need metrics to give you that high-level view of system health, CPU, memory, error rates. And third, the real magic, is distributed tracing. This is the tool that lets you follow a single request as it weaves its way through your entire system, so you can pinpoint exactly where things went wrong or slowed down. And that brings us to the end of our journey. We've walked through all these massive decision points, so let's bring it all together. What is the pragmatic path forward?
You know, this quote from Abhishek Goswami just nails it. Success isn't about chasing the latest trend. It's about being incredibly deliberate. It's about that balance between the theory and the messy reality of your own organization. It boils down to this: draw clear boundaries for your services, be intentional about how they communicate, and above all, invest whatever it takes to see what's actually happening inside your system.
So I want to leave you with this one final question to ask yourself. Forget all the buzzwords for a second. Just ask, does our architecture make our team's life easier or harder? Does it enable us to move faster and build better things, or does it constrain us with friction and complexity? Because at the end of the day, the answer to that question will tell you if you're on the right path.